It's good to see you. My name is RJ Lago. This is me. There are people in this world, like I said 2 weeks ago, that love me, and there they are, all of them, right there. And that's my family. I'm the student pastor at the Nocatee campus. We've been there at Nocatee and loving this church for September will be 5 years for us. So we've been here a while. And tonight, we're continuing our series on the generations. We've talked about the silence, boomers, Gen X, Millennials. We haven't finished them. We're going to finish them just tonight, and we're going to spend most of our time talking about basically everything in this picture, okay? I'm just going to be honest with you. I don't know everything going on in this picture, but I made it, okay? So I don't know what that means about what's going to happen tonight, but it's going to be good. Let's start our time by hearing from Ecclesiastes chapter 3. And before I even do that, let me do the announcements, and then we're going to pray for Pastor Sean after we read from Ecclesiastes. You can catch up, so just the announcements for today. You can catch up on missed sessions with video and audio on the church's website and app. So you can hear Pastor Trevor do a lot of the intro work for this class. So if you're just jumping into this class, I don't know how much you're going to love it, but it's going to be great. You can... This book, The Multi-Generational Church Crisis, is our recommended book. This is by Brian Chappell, or Chappelle, I don't know. And it's a wonderful book. He's a Christian. And this book, Generations, by Dr. Twenge, is not a Christian. She's not a Christian at all. She's actually way more liberal than anything. But some of her insights are really good up until Gen Z. I think she's a little outdated, so we're going to be talking about Gen Z tonight. But this is a fantastic book. If you want to just do a proofread on what the generations and different generations, this is a helpful book, but she's not a Christian, so I do not endorse a chunk of what she says. But man, there's some stuff in there that's really good for research purposes. But with that said, let's read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, and I think it'll help us think through Gen Z a little bit. And so let's read verse 1 of Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear, a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. Let's pray. Father, I want to pray right now for my brother Sean. Pray for Pastor Sean right now, Lord, that you would spare his life. He has been through the ups and downs of valleys that I can't even imagine. Lord, it has been so difficult on our church to see a beloved pastor go through such a horrible season of cancer. And Lord, I pray for this the most basic thing, that you would spare his life, that you would heal him, that, Lord, through the wisdom of these doctors, that you would impart on them wisdom, more wisdom than they have, that you would save Sean's life and you would receive all of the glory. We pray that you'd care for Jenny. We pray, Lord, that you would care for that sweet woman, that sweet wife, that you would help her to rest even as she's caring night and day for her husband. I pray that you would bless her and help her to rest. Help the kids to not understand the depths of what is going on their family. I pray that you would save Sean. I pray for this thing, Lord, knowing that you alone can answer it. You alone is our hope, and we trust you with all that will come in the Perone's life and in this church's life. We pray for these things in your name. Amen. All right. So just really quickly with review for this class, we've been talking about the generations and generational conflict. So this is important in a lot of ways if you're new to this, is because in the room right now, there's a lot of different even generations, right? There's a lot of different generations. And we need to understand the times that we live in, and also I would argue from this class, if you go back and listen to some of the past lectures and even do some more research for yourself, I think it'll unlock for you an understanding of how did we get here? How did we get to where we're at right now in 2025 in the crazy times that are going on? But then that also moves to how do we disciple people in our church that are of different generations, and especially how do we disciple people of younger generations? People that are younger than us. Is I'm not that old, okay? I'm 31, I'm not that old. But as I get older, I'm learning, man, these young kids, these 15-year-olds, they are wearing me thin. I was talking to Pastor Trevor. Youth ministry is it is a young man's sport. It's not for the old faint of hearts, because it wears you out. Hanging around with young bucks day in and day out, and it's difficult. But as Christians, we have to be having this heart for the next generation. What are we passing on? What are we giving to the next generation? How are we discipling the next generation? And in a church like ours that's large, even in small churches especially, how do we pursue this intergenerational unity? How do we do that? How do we actually love one another even though we're in different generations? So just looking at the generations, greatest generation, silent, boomers. Gen X, we talked about 2 weeks ago. We spent a lot of time on Gen X, and I think it's really important to look at them because they are in every generation, there's the older section and the younger section. So I'm a younger millennial, almost. My brother is right on the cusp of being a Gen Z, and my sister is Gen Z all the way. And so there's differences of where you're at in generations, but we talked about Gen X, and younger Gen X are parents to a lot of Gen Zs today, and millennials are now becoming parents. We're now becoming parents. And so how are millennials going to do as moms and dads is really what we're going to start seeing very soon. And we're going to be talking a lot about Gen Z, and I would say for the past 10 years of my life, so I've been doing student ministry, this year will be 8 years, so almost a decade, I've been with Gen Z, from the a little bit older Gen Z to that now we're moving into Gen Alpha, which is the next generation. I've been hanging out with these kids, okay? So I feel like I've got a lot of scars and a lot to talk about, and I'm going to try to stay concise, but I want to go back and just review millennials for a moment and finish. 2 weeks ago, we didn't get to finish millennials, so let's try to finish them now. We've talked about who they are, 3 key discipleship parts, so independence on steroids. It's even, just on that, it's become narcissism, is what we talked about last time. So it turned from the independence of the latchkey kids to just independence on steroids, where it's just turned into, if you contradict me, you're contradicting my existence. And I think what's actually interesting, I think this book, Generations, is a little bit outdated for Gen Z, is that the older Gen Zs that are closer to millennials think this way. In Gen Z, the younger ones do kind of think this way, but this is the start of the cancel culture that we've all experienced, right? Is if you disagree with me and I'm homosexual and you say homosexuality is a sin, you're erasing me. You're saying I shouldn't exist. Is how that's interpreted, right? Does that make sense? That can make sense in your mind when you understand you've been inculcated in a generation that just believes it's all about myself. And my sexual expression is everything. It's the most intimate thing that God's created in us, is sexual expression. And so if it contradicts the biblical worldview, then there must be something wrong with God. There can't be something wrong with me. And so this idea of like, I'm special, if I were in charge, then everything would be better. So I don't know if I said this last time, but Gen X is getting boxed out in leadership from politics to CEOs, and millennials are jumping in quick because we think life would be better if we were in charge, not the old types. If millennials were in charge, everything would be great, okay? Because we think so highly of ourselves. So that's millennials. That's 30 and older, into close to Gen X. That's what's going on. That's one thing. My generation is obsessed with sex, but we're not having any sex. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit. Porn, dating apps, LGBTQ+, sexual expressions that are just out there are just commonplace. Why? Because it goes back to this independence. And on top of that, porn is just ubiquitous, where it's everywhere. And on top of that, now people are dressing even pornographic and immodesty and in modest ways. And so you have this ubiquity of sexual immorality, and it's so, I can get it anywhere I want, but where did God create sex to happen? in the safest and most happy, intimate place, in marriage between a man and a woman. We believe that as Christians. And listen, the data is starting to catch up with that biblical truth, is that so one of the things that was a stat when I was in high school and it demoralized the whole church was that Christians are getting divorced on a rate that is the exact same as the culture. And that's not true at all. It's actually not true when you dig into the research. You know who the most happy women are? It's not secular women, or actually the most unhappy women are liberal Christian women, which is interesting. The most happy women are conservative Christian women. They have the lowest divorce rates. Christian conservative men are in the same category. But the happiest a woman can be is in a conservative Christian marriage where you're faithfully going to church, is the one indicator they say. If you're nominal and you're not going to church that often, you're actually in the worst category, which is interesting. We could talk about that for a long time. But it's because in a happy marriage, there's intimacy. There's sexual intimacy in how it was supposed to be created. And so with that, my generation, we're so excited about sex and expression and we've gotten used to pornography that it's like, well, why would I do the hard labor of actually having a relationship when I could just have all of the pleasure that I want through porn and all these different ways? So millennials are the most, and I'll talk about this a little bit with Gen Z. I think she gets this a little bit messed up. But older Gen Z, millennials, are the first generation that have kind of not thrown off childhood and adolescence and liberalism, and we've embraced more of continuing to stay liberal because we never get married and have kids. So she talks about in the book, and I think it's so helpful, is there's two types to life. There is the fast-paced life, and there's the slow-paced life. And the fast-paced life is the life that most conservative Christians are living, where you're married and you have kids and you're working a job and you're loving your family. And that's the fast-paced life. Why? Because if I'm married, I didn't realize this till I had kids, but life gets a lot more stressful when little tykes run around your house. And our house used to be the cleanest place on planet Earth. And then I had children, and they've destroyed it. And every day I feel like I'm building my house back together, doing laundry, doing the dishes, helping my wife keep the house clean. Like we're always having conversations of how do we keep this place? It's because it's fast-paced. I'm working, I'm coming home, and then I've got to keep working hard. That's fast-paced. Slow-paced lifestyle is I'm going to delay getting married, having kids. I'm going to just keep getting more and more educated. I'm going to keep going to college and working a job and making all this money and spending it on myself. It's a slow-paced lifestyle. It's not that they're sinful. It's that there's what we just read in Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything, right? There's a time to learn and go to school, and then there's a time to go practice what you've learned and actually put it into every area of life. There's a time for that. But millennials and a little bit of Gen Z especially, they've not moved towards marriage and kids. We'll talk about that later. And we've normalized taboo breaking where it's just the most demonic, satanic, sexual expression that we can imagine. And 100 years ago, these people, these were in the closet, back alley, very strange things, but 100 years later in 2025, we're celebrating, we're having parades over it. So why is that? Well, it's because our generation has developed in this independent lifestyle towards we want to break every taboo, because why not? You express yourself and I'll express myself. And just getting practical on this point, when you're evangelizing somebody who's a millennial and is really built into this, what you're talking about when you're evangelizing somebody who has a worldview, you have to prove yourself to be a trustworthy person and that your worldview is actually producing better than theirs. You almost have to make them jealous of the Christian faith. Does that make sense? So here's what I mean. So my son, my oldest son, Rezi, he just won his T-ball championship last night. So we are the Phillies. I'm a Braves fan, and we just beat the Braves last night to win the championship. It was a close nail-biter game, but we won. And people on our team, okay, non-Christians, Christians, there's a whole gamut of, it's not a Christian league, it's just, the rec league. You watch them parent, and you're like, this is so sad. There's such sadness going on because there's people on this team, there's parents on this team who are much more excited to take a picture of their son they get championship rings now. It's really cool. That not everybody gets a trophy. The Braves walked off crying. The Phillies got their championship ring. So there is some healing going on in the world. And so my kids' team, they're winners, they're champs. And so they got rings. They got these big old rings that said champion on it. And this family was taking pictures of their kid with the ring. And then after they would take the picture, they weren't interacting with their kid and getting excited. They were taking that and texting it, sending it, posting it, and they were more excited about that. Why? Because it's all about myself. And what social media is really becoming, I want to prime you with this, is thinking really negatively about social media. Social media, in my opinion, is our little temples for ourselves. And we put up this little idol of ourself, and we go to the temple on our phones, and we want people to worship at our temple. And so we post all sorts of things that get them to like it and appreciate it and worship at it and bow down to it, really physically, like bow down and look down at it so that we can get this praise. Now, it never lasts, right? We know that it doesn't satisfy. And so it's there for a moment and it's gone. And that's what social media has become. It's all about myself. And these millennial parents that I'm a parent with, watching our kids win this championship, their parenting style is so sad because it's all about themselves. It has nothing to do with the child. It has all about themselves. I could keep talking about that, but let's keep moving. We didn't get to talk about this. This is where we left off last time. And needing to be spoon-fed. It's really hard to talk about your generation because you're talking about yourself and you feel bad. But you really don't want to down your generation too hard. But I'm really trying, okay? I really went hard on my generation to prove to you I'm trying to be unbiased here, okay? Because when I go on the next rampage with Gen Z, you're going to be like, man, he's going hard. But I really went hard on myself and my generation. My generation, what I mean by needing to be spoon-fed is 3 different ways. The first way is empathy abuse. Who's heard of the word empathy? Okay. When was the first time you heard that word? Was it probably within the past 6 years? Like, do you remember? I remember when I first heard of that word because I was like, why is everybody using this word? What is empathy? Empathy came on the scene about 10 years ago with the Millennials, 10 to 15 years ago. Like, do you remember as a child thinking about empathy? You remember, like when you were a child, do you remember thinking, I got to be a really empathetic person? You remember that? That was childhood. No, right? Like, not for any of us in this room. How often were you thinking, I need to be the most empathetic person? Your parents probably never used that word. Why? Well, because it's kind of a modern, invented word. And what does it mean? Joe Rigney, a pastor, he's got a lot of great content on this, and I think he's spot on. I think he's so right about this. Just came out with a new book on empathy. He has a book on leadership that's really taking down empathy. And what he describes empathy versus sympathy. There's a biblical term of sympathy in the Bible, and there's empathy. And as Joe Rigney says, he talks about it like quicksand. So empathy, so if this is solid ground, this podium, this stage that I'm on, and this is quicksand, and I'm drowning in quicksand. If you're an empathetic person, what's the best way to save me? Get in it. Get in the sand with me, right? You want to experience what it's like to die of quicksand. You want to get in the quicksand with the person to understand what they're going through. And in one sense, you can understand why it's not terrible, right? Like if we're wanting to think about this in the most kind terms, it seems compassionate, but it's not. It's really not. Because are you helping the person if you're both now drowning in the quicksand? No. Sympathy, as Joe Rigney describes it, and I think it's so helpful. Once you see this and it's unlocked for you, I correct everybody I talk to. I'm like, you don't want to be empathetic, you want to be sympathetic. And let me tell you that I'm trying to indoctrinate everybody on this. Sympathy is you see the person in need and you keep at least 1 foot grounded on the hard soil and truth, and you step in there and you pull them out. That's sympathy. And think about Jesus. What does he do? Is he empathetic or is he sympathetic? Praise be to God that he's sympathetic, right? He sympathizes with our needs, but he's yet without sin. Isn't that amazing? But my generation, we're all about empathy. We're all about empathy. We have to try to understand exactly what this person's going through and offer no solutions. Because what it turned into is the person in the quicksand, now that I've gotten in there with them, they know better than I do about dying in quicksand. So we should just listen to them about the ways to get out of this. And so what it's turned into continuing forward is, well, there's really no way out except to listen to somebody in the quicksand. Instead, what we should be saying is, no, the truth of God's word is where we foundationally put our feet and help people out of every situation. Every situation. From tragedy to sin to growing up in a really difficult generation. We need to disciple people and help them think through empathy versus sympathy. And we should correct them. And we should not be afraid to correct them. We should actually want to lovingly correct them in truth. That's what we're called to do as Christians. And Christians, again, this is where it's been unlocked for Christians, is they can manipulate us, is because as Christians, we really want to be nice. But Jesus never calls us to be nice. He calls us to be compassionate, to be kind, to be gentle, to speak the truth in love, to be bold and courageous, to give our lives for the cause, to provide, to protect, to fight. I mean, my goodness, Jesus pulls a sword out of his mouth at the end of times and will slay the nations with it. That's pretty dope. I mean, that's not nice, but it's pretty awesome. That's what he calls us to do. In my generation, we're babies to this. We want to be taken care of. We get squirmy when people disagree with us, especially when they're disagreeing with us in a really nice way. It throws us off. You're supposed to hate me, Christian. And what as Christians we should do is we should try to say, especially with non-believing, whether it's your children, grandchildren, whether it's somebody at your workplace, what you should try to do is not try to win them with argumentation up front. What we need to do is win them with, my life in Christ is better than your life without Christ. And you can be helped too. Can I help you? Can I show you the way of what it looks like to have a healthy marriage, to have a healthy parenting life? I'm not perfect, but I know the way because my God teaches me the way, and his name is Jesus Christ. Can I help you with that? I want to help you with that. You see that sympathy. I'm trying to help the person out. And a lot of people, they don't want to be helped. But if you can leave a good taste of what Christians are supposed to be in their mouth, man, it makes all the difference. So it's not just empathy, though. One of the big problems that I see in my generation is no dads, no solutions. Have you guys ever, if you go online on YouTube, there's this YouTube channel called Dad, How Do I? It's really sad, but it's actually it's a great, really useful YouTube channel. And the whole YouTube channel, you see it at the top is, I'm going to teach you via YouTube how to change a tire, how to shave, how to tie a tie, how to jump a car. And I'm going to do that because your dad never taught you how to do that. And so my generation has turned to guys like this guy. I don't know anything about this guy, except that he has helpful videos sometimes. As we turn to them, and we turn to all sorts of other means of masculinity, and we turn to all these means because we want to be equipped. We don't know what it means to be a godly man. We don't know what it means to even be a man or a woman, let alone know how to be a godly one. And you want to know the most clear example of that? We elected to the Supreme Court of the United States somebody who couldn't define what a woman is. Okay. That should tell you something about a whole generation. What is a woman? What is a man? For the longest time, if you'd have asked me, I don't know how I would have defined it, even as a Christian. I don't know how I would have defined it. And it's been through God's grace that godly men in the church have taught me this. And for my generation, for millennials, we have so many problems, but we really just genuinely need to go back to the basics. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? And even though I'm an adult, I'm 25 to 35, maybe even 40, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? You need to learn how to, if you're going to disciple somebody of the millennial generation, you need to learn how to describe those things in the most simple terms. And honestly, we're at Nocatee, we're strategizing of how to make summers all about masculinity, femininity, teaching them skills, principles, and practice. Those two things. Because if we can get them just getting excited of, I know what it means to be a man, and I know how to do this, because Pastor RJ, his leaders taught me how to do this, man, I think you can conquer the world. I think you can do a lot of good things. And the Bible is the most helpful because God created us to be men, to be women. You ever thought about this? If you're a man, you're going to be a man for all eternity. If you're a woman, you're going to be a woman for all eternity. You don't lose your sex when you go off to heaven. Isn't that amazing? It's pretty outstanding. So if it's that important that for all eternity we're going to continue in the same genders that we have, man and woman, we better get used to them. We better understand how to be a man and a woman in God's image. And my generation certainly does not know how to do that. And especially for feminism and beyond, okay? If boomers gave birth to feminism in the 60s and gave rise to feminism in the 60s, Gen Xers were the first believers of feminism and really just started believing it in the culture. Millennials have turned it into, we believe it so much that feminism is the reality. That we have to believe that men and women are equal in role and in nature. I'm raising a boy and 2 girls, and that is not true at all. Boys are different. Girls are different. Boys are rowdy. My boy is starting to get to the age where he can actually really hurt me, and I'm kind of inviting it with him. And he got on to me the other day. He's like, why don't you wrestle me so hard, but you don't do that with the girls? And I'm like, yeah, you're darn right. I ain't going to do that with the girls. I'm not going to beat them up like I beat you up. I'll tickle them and we'll wrestle, but I'm never going as hard as I go with my boy because I want him to be tough. I want him to be a man. And with the girls, what we've lost for the girls is we've lost what it means to be a woman. And so now, here's the really scary part, is that we think that feminism will give us as women everything we want. We think it will give us opportunities and jobs and working a career that will actually satisfy. And it's so funny because if feminist women would have just asked men who are working these careers, do you feel satisfied in your career? Well, sure, in some ways, but I really feel mostly satisfied in my home with my wife and my kids. But if we could focus on what God has called us to do, to bear children, to help our men accomplish the mission that God has given them, to support them, to encourage them, to strengthen them, to give them wise counsel, to be self-controlled, to not be gossiping and slandering in the church. Man, if women could do that, and I know they can because I've been around a lot of godly Christian women, that's what the church needs. That's what I'm talking about. If we get our little girls so obsessed. I talk about this with my girls all the time. I never talk to them like, what do you want to be when you grow up? They know they want to be a mom. And I encourage that. You want to be a mom, and I want you to be a mom because I want grandbabies one day. I want that. I know that's the good life, and I want that as a good father. I don't care if she's this expert lawyer and taking down, and she's on the Supreme Court. I don't care, and I don't want her to care about that because I know she won't be satisfied in that. I know how God has created her in her nature to want to have a family and not be left childless without the future of a family. Now, what I'm saying right now, does that sound pretty radical and based, a little bit like pretty hardcore? I'm telling you, it's more of a warning than it really is like supposed to be this like ideological patriarchy stance, okay? It's not really meant to be that. I don't care if you take it that way, but it's not really meant to be that. But if you do take it that way, fine, take it. But it's more of a warning, as you'll see in the next generation, is that it's getting scary out there in this regard. I think we're going to make a turn, and we'll be more positive next week. But our society, for millennials specifically, we have soft, weak men who don't stand up for anything and fight for truth. And we have women that are trying to do that in the place of men, and nothing's going well because nobody's living the way they should be. Instead of having dads for liberty standing up at school boards, we have moms for liberty standing up at school boards. That's an indicator. Even in the conservative movement, we have this all mixed up. Okay, so I don't think anybody's getting this right. Republican, Democrat, nobody's getting this right. Christians, we have to get this right. We have to be the ones that understand what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And as millennials specifically, we really do need to be humble and learn the basics all over again. We need to learn the basics. And I can tell you my story on that. It would take too long. But I had to go back and learn the basics when I had my son. We became foster parents. We got this kid in our home. He was 9 months old, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. And I thought this was going to be much easier than it was, and it was way hard. And I was like, what is going on? I don't know what it means. I don't know how am I supposed to raise a boy, let alone a child, was the question. I could tell you my journey on the side or off script, but that would take too long. But as millennials, we need those basics again. We need to be shown what godly womanhood looks like. We need to see it and know it and be shown it in the home. We need to see these things. We need to be shown and humbled. Really, my generation really needs to be humble in the sense of we're just not special. There's nothing special really about my generation. Really nothing unique or not special. We really, at the end of the day, are just men and women under a holy God, like every other generation that's ever existed before us. Okay. Wow, I just beat up on my generation. Before I move into Gen Z, any questions on millennials? I want questions. I know you guys don't do questions as often. I really would love questions so we can dialogue about this. It's, again, I said this last time, studying the generations, don't take it personal. Don't think that's just wrong. No, actually, there's so much in that book when I was reading. I was like, it might not be me that experienced that, but all my buddies from high school, that's them now. And so there's so much we can learn from the generations when we study them that actually there's ways to disciple us to be really helpful. Questions? Yes.
So talking about like empathy.
Yes.
How do we witness and show compassion and sympathy without seeming judgmental?
Yeah, great question. So the question was, how do we talk about sympathy without being judgmental? And I think the easiest way to do that is talk about how Jesus treated us. So, and even getting to the place of, so there's a way we can talk about Jesus that is judgmental, right? There's a really easy way. You're a sinner, you're going to hell, and you're going to rot there, but man, this Jesus guy, he's good, and you should trust in him. Nobody wants to believe that, okay? Nobody wants that, right? That's judgmental. Nobody wants that. Though that's true, people are going to hell if they don't believe in him, and you should believe in him. There's a way to talk about Jesus in a way that that would not be judgmental. This would be my answer to that question. Would be, if I was a millennial living this lifestyle and I had somebody come up to me, I would want them talking to me about what is truth, showing that I don't want this to be an apologetics class, but it really could swerve into that really hard. But my generation, we don't know what truth is. I've been in arguments, I've been in debates back and forth with millennials at times and witnessing where there's no such thing as truth. It's your truth and there's my truth, and there's no such thing as objective standard truth. And so if I could understand that, if I could be shown that, and I think it's really simple of the Bible is true. The Bible is true. And the way to not be judgmental about it would be, I was a sinner. We have to go back to the basics. I broke God's law. I am the chief of sinners. I lived my life like a sinful millennial, just like every other millennial. I was sinful too. And I needed Jesus. And look, he's helped me see the truth and reality and the morality of how we should be living. Jesus is the one that we should be trusting. I'm not trying to win you to RJ's religion. That's where people get it wrong. We're not a cult. We're actually just showing people Jesus is the way, that there's no other way, that it's not RJ's way, it's what the Bible says. And if you think that some of what I've said is judgmental, if you read the Bible, if we're using that word judgmental, I think a better word might be harsh, might be a better word than judgmental. the Bible is much more rough than some of the things I've just said. And what should we do with that? Should we dull it down and make it easier for us? No, but we need to explain it in a loving way. Speak the truth in love, right? So, and I think we first have to start with, I love millennials and I want them to know Jesus like I know Jesus. Because if they could know Jesus, they would be satisfied. RJ Millennial before Jesus was searching after all of these things, and I was never satisfied. And I look back now and realize I was searching after these things and I was never satisfied. And if I had continued going down that road, I still would have never been satisfied. But even though life's not perfect, there's so many things that are difficult in my life, just like everybody else's life, I am completely satisfied because I have Jesus Christ. He's been good to me. He is the way, the truth, and life. And we have to humble ourselves and say, I don't live in RJ's world. It's not my truth. It's Jesus' truth, and that's it. He's capital T truth. He teaches us how to live. He keeps the 10 Commandments where I could not keep the 10 Commandments. I failed in every 10 Commandment. He kept them all. He's the perfect man. He died for me and took judgment away from me. And he offers new life to anyone who would believe in him. So I think the way that we share the gospel is, listen, I want to help you out of the pit. Let me help you. Can you trust me? Just listen. Let's have a conversation. Walk with me. And let's talk about Jesus. Let me tell you all the ways that Jesus, not myself, not RJ, but Jesus is making my life better. And I think and that gets to a really fundamental thing, which is, as Christians, we need to be living what I just said, right? If we want people to believe in Jesus, then we should be the first ones to experience all of Jesus for all of life, right? It would be judgmental. It'd be judgmental for me to share the gospel with somebody, but me not live that gospel out in every area of my life. I'd be a hypocrite. I don't want people to be hypocrites. I want people, whether you like me or not. Okay, I'm just telling you, I'm not bragging. Whether you like me or not, and there's plenty of people in this world that don't like me, I want to be the most consistent person because Jesus calls us to do that as men and women. He calls us to be consistent in every area of life. So when you see me at my house, I want to be a godly, good man at my home because Jesus is calling me to do that. When you see me here, I want you to see the same thing. I want my students in my ministry to see that. I want my parents to see that. I want my children, most importantly. My hope is that my children will grow up and say, my dad wasn't perfect, but he loved Jesus with all his heart, and he messed up a lot, but that's what we can say is he loved Jesus, and he wanted me to love Jesus. And I think if we get off of ourselves and stop thinking about and not get offended when people don't like Jesus, it's just going to happen, and say, it's okay. You don't have to love Jesus. There is consequences for that, but I'm telling you, your life will be better. And if you can say, I'm willing to leave the conversation there and say, hey, I think you would if you would trust in Jesus, your life would be better. But God bless you, I love you, and if you want to keep having conversations, let's talk. But I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to wrestle with you. I'm not going to beat you up. I want you to leave thinking, man, that conversation with a Christian was really good. That was really encouraging. I want to learn more about this Jesus. Is that helpful, that answer? Okay. Any others? Okay, let's move into, I don't know if you guys came here for this, but we're going to talk about Gen Z. Gen Z are aging out of student ministry right now, but this is the generation that we are on pretty much right now, that everybody's starting to get a grasp of their generation. I mean, if you look at the numbers, what is that, 8, 7? The youngest Gen Zs are juniors in high school, okay? So most of Gen Z is in the workforce right now. So if you work anywhere, you're running into Gen Z people, right? So these are your coworkers now. These are the new recruits, the entry-level people that you're having to interact with. That's how you should think of. Their parents were Gen X and Millennials. Their children will one day be polars and post-polars. We don't know what their grandchildren will be called yet, 13 to 30. So I am a very young millennial, very young. My brother is right on the cusp of becoming a Gen Z, but he's still technically a millennial. I think he would identify as millennial if I were to talk to him about this. My sister My youngest sister is Gen Z. She's like 92. And so she's an older Gen Z, but definitely, man, when I talk to her, I'm like, man, you're just a different generation. Like it's like, I just see it. The more I study this, I'm like, my sister is a Gen Z all the way. That's not bad. It's just what she is. What is Gen Z, and what are the three areas that I want to highlight for you about Gen Z? First off, before I go further with this, what I think she says in this book is getting outdated, okay? I don't know when she finished writing this book or when it was published, but I think as I've been writing it, I think she ends they probably published this book, it says 2023. So she probably had this done and written in 2021 to 2022 and hit the market in 2023, I guess. And so her data doesn't take into account what happened in 2024 and 2025, which I think are going to be very important years. But we'll talk about that next time and going further. So let's talk about, I'm calling it the dependence, not the independence. We've moved on from that. The dependence of the iPhone kids, okay? There are a couple ways you can identify Gen Z. One generation marker is, they call them iGen, is how she calls them. Another way is Zoomers. I really love Zoomers. It just makes much more sense. Zoomers being the moniker for them because they'll never forget it. This is crazy. They will never forget a time. They will never remember a time pre-COVID. COVID is like a huge identification marker for them. The oldest of them lived as children through the 2008 economy collapse. The oldest of them became adults in they were in college in the early stages of COVID. They've seen political division. We are in a cold civil war in many ways. Like that's what they're living through right now, is this cold civil war. Their understanding of a president, mine was late stages of Bush and Obama, and I was an adult graduating college, and I was out of college when Trump was elected. Their years are Obama through their childhood, but mostly Trump, which is pretty wild. So they've lived through mostly Trump, and Biden have been their experiences of a president and a presidency, which is pretty interesting if you just start thinking about. I think presidencies are really big markers, too, to understand the generations. I think they have a lot of influence. Climate change awareness is really big. I don't know how big it's going to be in the future, but we'll at least put that there. Especially older Gen Z, they're very big into climate change awareness. School shootings are very commonplace. I was in England a few months ago, and it was wild. The conversations that our missionaries were like, just don't ever bring up guns. Don't talk about guns. Don't talk about them at all, because people in England, they just don't understand them, and they just think that school shootings are literally happening like every other day at schools. And it's like, well, maybe around the country, but we're a really big nation. But like school shootings are common. Young adulthood and younger is COVID. Okay, so the oldest experienced it in college or late high school. The youngest ones will never remember a time before COVID and masking and all of that. They are digitally dependent. Their identity, and we'll talk about their relationships, are formed around the iPhone. And this one is interesting too, because I do think it plays into it, is that they're the most racially and ethnically and sexually diverse nation of all time. So gender and ideology, of course, they're the most radical in that regard. But if you think about just the past 100 years, the silent generation was 78% white. This generation, Gen Z, is 52% white. So they're probably going to be the last generation, if the numbers continue the same, that will be the last generation of America having a majority of a race class, if you want to call it that way, a majority ethnicity, if you want to say it that way. Now, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. I'm just telling you that I think does play into the piece of the pie of what's going on with this generation. Okay, so the dependence of the iPhone kids. The first thing is that iPhones are changing them, and they're changing all of us, but they've changed them. They're totally different from all of us in this room. Imagine for a moment, maybe this happened to you today, have you ever left your house and you forgot your phone at home? That ever happened to you? What's one word that would describe how you feel when that happens? Naked. Naked, right? Are you going to yell naked? You can yell naked. Naked, right? He was doubting on that one. Yeah, it's naked, right? You feel. I never teach without my iPad, and I feel naked having to use paper again. But anyway, you feel naked when you don't have your phone, okay? And all of us in this room, okay, so how many of you, let's go back for a second. How many of you are Gen Z? So there's a few of you in this room, so 95 to 2012. A couple of you? Okay, actually, I think more than the Gen Xers. That's kind of cool. You guys have lived in a world where the digital world is everything. Now, I think, we'll talk about this next week, I think that Gen Z is going to be more like their parents than we realize, where they're going to be the last digital. So Gen X was the last analog, first digital. I think Gen Z is going to be the last digital, the first IA generation. Augmented intelligence is going to be, artificial intelligence is going to be a big deal. It's a huge, guys, that is the biggest thing since the iPhone. I think it's bigger. But here's what I mean by this. So look at this graph. 2010 through 2014 are extremely important years. Why? May see why? If you look at the times, 42% in 2011. Smartphones, these are when smartphones came out, okay, and they're penetrating the market. 42% of Americans had a smartphone in 2011. By 2012, it'd be 54%. 2013, 65% of the world, of America, I think even the world, had a smartphone. That's really vitally important. That year, 2013 and 2012 and 2013, I'll date myself, I was a senior in high school in 2012, and I remember that's when I got my smartphone, is the end of 2012. And I remember all of my friends started getting it that year, and everybody started having smartphones. And why is this important? Well, it's because when you're a generation that's so dependent on a smartphone, you have literally everything in your pocket. You ever see the picture where it's like, you have an iPhone right here, and then it's everything that the iPhone can do, like a camera, a calculator, like a notepad. There's hundreds of things that our phones can do. Well, they live in a generation that what we're really starting to see, the malevolent, in my opinion, the malevolent philosophy that's really driving a lot of what's going on is a philosophy called transhumanism, okay? Transhumanism is the philosophy and scientific movement that advocates for the use of advanced technologies to enhance the human condition, physically, intellectually, and emotionally beyond natural biological limits. So what does that mean? Why does that matter? Well, think about what that means for Gen Z. They've grown up in a world where biologically you're not supposed to know everything your phone knows. Do you know that? Your brain is not meant for that. Maybe in a sinless world, but we live in a sinful world, and your brain's not meant for that. And this is transhumanism, is that we've been moving towards this time where we're merging technology and advancements with technology with humans. And so you can think about that with your iPhone. I'm not supposed to know as much as my iPhone knows, but I'm starting to know as much as my iPhone knows because of that. It's teaching me. You can think of prosthetic arms or more of a benign, even positive transhumanism. But as we'll see, AI and putting a brain chip in your brain is the future. Unless there's World War or Civil War or something like that. The future is we're going to be putting brain chips in the next, maybe by the end, they're doing it right now. They've successfully put in brain chips into people's brains. AI, and what that means, the idea behind it, Elon Musk is the big proponent of this, I forget the name of his company, if anybody's, Neuralink. And the reason why Neuralink has this, why they're doing this chip, is that it's supposed to cure like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. Because there's I don't know, I'm not a biologist or a doctor, but it's rewiring your brain and fixing the synapses in your brain to cure these diseases. That's the benign, helpful way to think about what it is. But think about what it can do. Like, think about what this can do. If you want to go see what the future is probably going to look like more and more is the Matrix movies. Okay, I'm not condoning everything in those movies. But that's the idea is like, okay, let's download into Neo's brain all of the fighting skills that he needs to take on the bad guys. That is less of a dream and becoming closer and closer a reality. Okay? Let me keep going and we'll come to your question in a second. But that is transhumanism. And so we're moving towards this time, whether you've known it until right now or not, that how much of our lives are dependent on these things. Okay? How many of you would have fallen asleep on me if I didn't have something on the screen? Okay? Right there. At least one was honest in this room right here. Okay? We are dependent on these things. Now imagine living in a generation where you've never known a world without them. That is Gen Z. Did I tell last time about the time when my iPhone had a recall? Did I say that last time? Can't remember. It's 2 weeks ago. Did I say that last time? Okay, so I won't say it again. A great example is at summer camp this year, we're not when they get on the bus and they go to camp, we're taking all their phones away, and they're going to spend the whole week without their phones, and they'll get it on the way back. And last year we did it, not to this fullest of extent, but every year I've done it in ministry. My last church we did it, and students always said it was the best week of their life. Interesting. But imagine what are the effects when all you've ever known is the iPhone in your pocket? What are the effects of that when iPhones are ubiquitous everywhere? Well, I think we're starting to see some of the results. And the thing that she does not talk about this in the book, and I think she should have because her whole thing is about technology. I think she doesn't, and she's Gen X, so she's a digital dino. But I'm going to teach you, I said that last time. Sorry. Is that the algorithm is so important, okay? Who's ever heard of the word algorithm? Social media algorithm. You probably heard of it. How many of you would say you understand it? Okay, good. Well, this won't be so much, it'll be not so much review, but it'll be at least helping you see what does it look like to live in a world like this. This is a helpful thing I stole off the internet about the TikTok algorithm. The algorithm on TikTok, I don't have TikTok, but I'm telling you it's the best algorithm out there. How the algorithm works is basically think about it like it's a data collection system that sorts your content and the data from your life and then pushes, that's a good word to think of, it pushes the content that you will want to see next so that you will stay on the platform longer so they can make money off of you. That's how it works, okay? It's up there. But how TikTok works is that you get on TikTok. I got TikTok for 15 seconds. I looked at 3 videos, and I said, I don't want this in my life, and I deleted it. But if I had stayed on there longer, this is how it's supposed to work. They'll show you 8 videos, and within 8 videos, they've identified your interests. How they do that is how long you linger on the videos before you swipe up and move to the next video. They're identifying all of the captions, the hashtags, maybe things you liked, the data you put in. If you're a man or a woman, they really care about what gender you put in. And if you put LGBTQ+, there's a whole section of what the algorithm's going to be pushing on you there. Once they have sufficient data on you, what it's going to do is learn based on all sorts of things. So parents don't think about this too often, but I think about it because it's my job, is the algorithm picks up on what you're listening to. You guys know when you've talked about something and it pushes an ad for it? Okay, now think about if you're a teenager and you're at public school, like many of mine are in my youth ministry, and all of your friends are looking at things. The algorithm hears the location data from the cell towers are pinging all together. Their friends online together. The algorithm knows all of this in a very quick way, is able to push content to students. TikTok is the best one because you'll never see 2 videos twice. Can you imagine that? Like, if you actually think about what that means, you'll never see the same video twice on TikTok. This is basically the best way to think about this in an ancient world would be, if you were describing it to somebody in Jesus' day, is like imagine the gladiatorial games on not on repeat, but literally constantly, and you never see the same battle over and over and over again. You're entertained all the time. You're consuming all the time. Because they're making money off of you, the idea of this is that for the social media side especially, is that it's pulling your friends and people you follow, and they're pushing things that you will likely want to see. I have a funny meme for this. I hoped, especially some of you boomers in the room would like this. It says, if you can't see it, it says people in the 60s. She's on a rotary phone. She says, I better not say that or the government will wiretap my house. And then it says people today, hey, wiretap, do you have a recipe for pancakes? Okay, that's what we're living in right now. Is like we've all just kind of accepted that the government's going to listen to us and big corporations are going to listen to us, and we kind of like it. There was a study done that if they took the algorithm off of social media, would you still like it? And they found that nobody likes social media without the algorithm.
What if you don't like it with the algorithm?
Then you and I are friends. And but people said, no, I don't want my phone and my social media without the algorithm. Why? Because it gets boring. I want to keep seeing things. I want to consume things. So what does that do to a generation? What does that mean when you live with the algorithm, not just with iPhones, but with the algorithm on top of that, and learning you and understanding you? What does that look like? What does that look like? I'm going to show you some graphs. What is the algorithm producing? Okay, that didn't come out well. This graph is showing, now look at the years, 2011, 2012 is when the jump is happening. Suicide, self-poisoning, major depressive episodes, and depressive symptoms is what you're seeing there. It's kind of hard to see, but the purple one, all of them are shooting up drastically. The one at the bottom is depressive episodes that are shooting up. There's a better one. This one might help you see it a little bit better. I didn't make these. These are online. I'll give you the sources later, but I love that they put the line there. Look, 2012. Look at the line. It starts going up. 145% increase with teens with major depression for girls and 161 for boys since 2010. Well, what happened in 2010, 11, 12, 13? We got iPhones. Everybody got iPhones. You're living with this. The percent of undergraduates diagnosed with mental illness, okay, so depression, anxiety. There's ADHD, bipolar, anorexia. Those are all at the bottom. I think these are outdated, by the way, too. I think this only goes to 2018. I think it's way higher for some of these, especially eating disorders, I think, are huge right now. But everything's going up. Everything's shooting up. Why? Why is that? And this last one is one of the saddest, is suicides for teens. 10 to 14 is on the rise, too. And this is outdated. This is 2020. There was a stat that came out, I think it was about a year and a half ago, that 1 in 10 public school high schoolers will commit suicide, or at least attempt it but commit it. 1 in 10. Okay. Why is this happening? She makes the argument in the book that it is smartphones. I think I want to go a step further and say it's the algorithm pushing this on you. This is going to get dark for a moment, so just stay with me. I won't get too crude or violent here or anything like that. But let me just take you down a path. If you were a young boy or a young girl getting your iPhone for the first time at 10 years old, and that's old, honestly, for this day and age. But you're 10 years old, you get your smartphone, and you get on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, all these, I can't even remember them all. You get one of these social media apps, and they've got the algorithm, and they're pushing it on you. If you're a boy, I've seen it in our ministry, what are the first big 3 things they're probably going to be pushing on you? If you're a boy, they know your age, they know your gender, what are they going to be pushing? For just an antidote, I was on YouTube, and the algorithm was pushing a lot of immodest women in my feed. And somebody told me, hey, you should change your gender and your age. And I changed it to, I was born in 1945, and I'm a woman. And I started getting ads for real estate on beachfront properties, as if I could afford those. And I loved it. And I got ads, for independent and assisted living homes. And so I was getting these ads, okay? The algorithm eventually picked up, and they know me now, even though the age has changed, but they know my interests. But regardless, I'm a boy. I'm young. What are they going to push on me? 3 things, 3 main things. There's probably more, but the 3 main things would be pornography, entertainment, and violence. The 3 big things. Imagine you're this boy, you're watching porn, but sin, just like pornography, can't stay there. It has to get worse and worse. And so what kind of porn will you start watching? You'll start looking at homosexual porn. It'll start pushing this to you. I've been with students, and I've talked to them about some of this stuff, and I've said, you ever see the ad? There's an ad sometimes that pops up as, are you gay? Take the test. Okay, well, I'm going to go take the test. What do you think it's going to say? You think it's going to say I'm a normal hetero man, or is it going to say I'm something on the LGBTQ spectrum? Of course it's going to say I'm something. And so what does that teach you? Well, okay, maybe I am homosexual. Maybe I'll start looking at pornography that's popping up in my feed. I won't think it's so gross. It starts pushing. The algorithm knows you best is kind of the idea you have to understand here. It knows you better than you want it to know yourself. So it starts pushing eventually transgender stuff too. Why not? It starts pushing this type of pornography. It moves to even worse stuff than that, but I won't go any farther. The entertainment, think about entertainment, for boys especially. It dulls the mind and it dulls our ability as boys and young men to do anything significant because they want to control young men. That's what Pharaoh wanted to do in Exodus. Read Exodus 1, 2, and 3. He wanted to control the men of Israel because he didn't want to go to war with them. It's the same thing. Control the young men, entertain them, dull their ability to fight, and they become suicidal because nothing's interesting anymore. And they push violence because that's the fun stuff to watch because you've been dulled into sleep, and we might as well watch people dying. Girls is a different message. It's very similar, but it's a different one. For girls, it's the message about body image and dark thoughts that lead to suicidal ideation and pornography. For girls, the body image turns like this. It moves from, it pushes these images on girls that are so fake. They show these beautiful bodies of women, but they're totally edited and photoshopped that they're just not real. That's not how people look. And they push this on girls, and what girls start believing is, well, I'm a normal teenage girl. This is not what I look like, and this is what I should look like. And so I need to start looking like that. And so they get into self-harm eventually, but they get into eating disorders. They start believing, okay, the only way to look that way is to have eating disorders. I think it's huge on the rise. But then think about dark thoughts. The algorithm starts pushing thoughts of usually at night when you're most vulnerable and alone and when your brain is trying to shut down and process what's happened, they're pushing more on it. Students all the time talk about their friends and even themselves being up till 2 a.m. scrolling on TikTok. Your brain can't take that. It's not meant to do that. But at night, girls are watching, they're being pushed videos that are about being alone, being lonely. That if I hurt myself, people will take notice of me and I'll actually feel something. Maybe people will notice if I attempt suicide. There's videos like this all on the internet. I've counseled and been a part of counseling girls that have been a part of these things. There's been videos, I remember seeing this video. It was so sad because she could have been a girl in our youth ministry. And it was a video of this girl crying, and she didn't say anything. It was just dark, sad music in the background, and she's weeping, and she's saying, if I just took my own life, people would love me. Think about that. What does that make you do and think when you see that video? It makes you believe that truth. And so maybe she's right. Maybe this girl who's weeping in this video is right. I feel sad and lonely too. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. Nobody cares about me. I should do this. It then moves porn, for women especially, it moves quickly to homosexual because we in our society we paint men as only caring about sex. And so for women, it would just be better if we just were with somebody that understands me. So let's move to homosexual pornography. And then in a homosexual relationship, you need somebody who's more masculine, and so transgenderism is coming. And the algorithm pushes these things. Like, this is not conspiratorial, crazy RJ talk. I could do that for you, but I'm not going to do that for you tonight. This is reality. This is what it pushes. This is the dark side of it. I do think there's a light side that the enemy is foolish on, and we'll talk about that next week. But this generation has been primed for AI. They've been primed for AI, and this is the next big thing. I think they will be like their parents, the last digital natives, the first AI generation. And Alpha, the one following them, will be the generation that embraces fully AI. Fully AI. And just getting practical on this, when discipling somebody of this age, you have to take into account their digital life. They're living two lives. A teenager. Most teenagers are living two lives. They're living a digital and a physical life. They're watching, some of them are watching, like I said, TikTok every night until 2 a.m. What do you think that does to their thought life? Your brain, like I said, your brain is not meant, the data on your brain actually suggests that you should stop looking at your phone and read and decompress an hour before bed. And you should go to sleep, and your life, even the scriptures talk about that I should go to sleep and dwell on the word of Christ. Why? Because your brain is meant to do that. It's meant to dwell on the things that you've experienced that day. But if you're indoctrinating your brain with these things, it gets really scary. We were done at 7:30, right? What time?
Well, we have to be in choir by 7:00.
You got to be at choir by 7:30. So let's end with this, okay? I want to end with this, is we're going to finish Gen Z next week, and I'm going to let's actually go get positive for a second, okay? Go to the back, you should be on the Gen Z part of your page, and let's just for the next 5 minutes talk about, and just I want to put it into your minds about Donald Trump, okay? If he wasn't in your mind enough today, I want to put him in your mind just a little bit more, that Donald Trump, the election of 2024, I think is way more significant than we all realize. And it could be, we were just talking about this, a few of us, it could be a stopgap where it's just a small little interlude and it gets worse. Could be that. I don't think so. I think the Lord might be doing something, and I think it's going to be more positive. There's a lot, it's going to be messy, but I think there's a positive aspect of this. And I think the way to think about this is that what happened in 2024, I think Gen Z is going to go back. They're already moving conservative. They're moving either, if you're a teenager in Florida, you're most likely to be in a home you're most likely, especially in Knox area, to be from a home that moved from New York to Florida to be conservative. And you raised in a family that's conservative and wanting and finally waking up and saying, we have to win our kids. We can't lose our kids anymore. We have to win this generation. And then if you're a kid growing up in California and your parents love it there, besides the weather, then your life is just going to be radically different. Now, there's a lot of similarities with the algorithm and whatnot, but the point of what I'm trying to say is that I believe, and we'll talk about this more next week, is that the algorithm can be discipled. I think your algorithm can be discipled, and I think you can disciple other people's algorithms. And we're going to talk about that next week. So it's not all doom and gloom. You should be excited because next week we're going to talk about all the positives that I think this generation can bring through Christ, and I think you guys can be a part of discipling the next generation.